So as you were saying, we're here for the second day of the Patria Colloquium. We're still at the University of Havana and very pleased to be here actually. Yesterday we were talking a little bit about what is going on here. We have over 400 representatives from close to 50 countries that have come here to discuss some main issues regarding digital communication, the use of technologies, and really thinking about a widespread strategic plan to think about communication from a leftist perspective, from a global south perspective. And that started yesterday, continues today with conferences, with workshops that are actually underway right now as we speak, and will continue also through tomorrow. And we were talking about the importance of networking. Actually, the weaving networks is one of the slogans of this colloquium, and the idea that keeps on bringing partners back together to Havana. Every edition of the Patria Colloquium is the possibility of sharing experiences, and not only sharing them, but also building those connections that allow us to really focus on digital communication as a worldwide perspective, a perspective that is bringing together media outlets from Latin America, from Asia, from the African continent, with all those exchanges of information, of ways of tackling and approaching digital communication. So precisely in that context, we are joined today by one of our guests. We have been holding these interviews throughout the Patria Colloquium, and he is Dr. Kwesi Pratt from Ghana. He is the director of the Pan-African Television and also the Secretary General of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. So thank you so much, Mr. Pratt, for joining us in teleSUR English. I would like to, besides welcoming you, of course, ask you, why come all the way from Ghana here to Havana once again for this colloquium? Why is it important to be here, to hear these conferences, to share your experiences in this goal of really doing a world perspective and strategic plan of digital communication?
Well, as a matter of fact, we've been under attack for hundreds of years. The attack has taken different forms: slavery, colonialism, now neo-colonialism, and so on. Our resources are being exploited, not for the benefit of our people, but to fatten the purse of the multinational corporations of the colonial metropolis. We are being told how to govern ourselves, our history is being changed, and so on. And to be able to combat this, we need to work together, we need to network, we need to have a common understanding of the common enemy who is responsible for our underdevelopment, our poverty, and our general misery. And that is why this colloquium is so very important. Another aspect why this colloquium is so very important is simply the fact that there's a focus on teleSUR. And I see teleSUR as something which comes out of the ALBA project, something which emphasizes the need for cooperation, the need to network, the need to strengthen ourselves, against the huge giant corporations, media corporations in the West, which are presenting a narrative that is very derogatory to our people, to our systems, to our history, and so on. So this colloquium is an extremely important colloquium.
So you were just talking, of course, about, besides our differences, the commonalities of the struggles and the problems that different parts of our world share, for example, Latin American and the African continent. What do you think are those common aspects? You were just talking about colonialism, you were just talking about the issue of the exploitation of our natural resources. What do you think are the key aspects in which a shared communication between the peoples of Africa and Latin America could benefit from those exchanges, and also the exchange of those experiences, how to tackle those issues and how to communicate to our peoples about those issues?
Well, all of us are victims of false narratives. For example, we are told that if we have to develop, we have to copy the Western countries and so on. But nobody tells us that the Western countries developed through our exploitation. The capital which was accumulated, which is responsible for the apparent prosperity in the West today, came out of the transatlantic slavery. It came out of classical colonialism, and it continues today from the neoliberal, neo-colonialist approach. Now, this is a complete false narrative, because the options that they had are not available to us in the third world. It doesn't matter whether we are in Latin America, it doesn't matter whether we are in Africa or we are in Asia. Today, there's no possibility for our countries to colonize other people. Today, there's no possibility for our people, to enslave others. There's no possibility for us, like brigands, to jump into other countries and overthrow governments and so on. So the only possibility available to us is the possibility of self-reliant development in cooperation with other countries like us. So this false narrative needs to be debunked completely if we are to break out of the chains of enslavement, the chains of exploitation and so on. So we need to combat the false narratives. So we have a lot of work to do to cooperate, because we don't have the resources that they have, so we share our resources. We have a lot of work to do to understand our different, backgrounds and so on, and build a synthesis which enables us to grow out of this very domineering system. I'm sure that you are well aware of the patriotic revolutions which are breaking out in West Africa. It makes a lot of sense. If you take the French-speaking West African countries, all of them, without exception, have to keep their foreign reserves in the Central Bank of France. The effect of that is that they borrow their own money and pay interest on their own money. This is untenable. We cannot survive this way. We need to break these chains. You understand? I come from West Africa. West Africa is dotted with foreign military bases, Western military bases, Western intelligence presence and so on. And yet, the Islamic insurgency is growing in West Africa. Many people are being killed on a daily basis and so on. We need to find out why we cannot establish military bases in the West, but they can establish military bases in our country. And why the more they establish military bases in our countries, the more insecure we become. And there's a challenge, you understand? One of the things that I found most impressive and beautiful about this colloquium is that I arrived there on a Saturday when the whole of Cuba was in blackout. There was no electricity supply anywhere in Cuba. In spite of that, this colloquium has proceeded without a hitch. That's a statement about the resilience of the Cuban people. What has happened here in this colloquium could not have happened in any Western capital. You cannot imagine that if the US had a total blackout for 48 hours, it could hold a colloquium such as this. This is the resilience of the Cuban people. Resilience of the Cuban people which must encourage all of us to rise up and become ourselves. You understand? And then, of course, there is the history, which is also extremely important. I mean, the history of Jose Marti, the history of Bolivar, the history of Nkrumah, and so on. This is an important history of a people, of leaders who saw the possibility of breaking the chains of enslavement and exploitation. And those traditions ought to be pursued. To be able to pursue these traditions, we need to understand the traditions, where they came from, their ideological underpinnings, and so on. And it is engagement, constant engagement of all of us, whether we are from Asia, whether we are from Africa or Latin America or the Americas, South America, whatever, that would enable us to understand the underpinnings of these traditions of resistance and make it possible for us to work together.
So you were just saying, Mr. Pratt, we need to debunk those false narratives. What is the role of these media outlets that Latin America is building, that Africa is building, that are being built also in Asia, for example? How can those media outlets, communal efforts, also connecting with, for example, community media outlets from different corners of our countries, what is their role in this debunking of the false narratives that are obviously imposed through broad network. For example, the main media agencies are dominated by both US or Europe powers, and that is a very hard network to counter or to fight off. So how can our efforts, what is their role in that fight?
Well, first of all, the media is a source of information, and information is absolutely important in shaping people's perspectives and attitudes and so on. So we have to provide the counter information. The media is also a source of analysis of the information, and we have to provide a counter analysis of the general information which is out there and so on. Now, this is a very difficult task. I mean, if we take the British Broadcasting Corporation, the British Broadcasting Corporation spends billions of dollars every year. There's no way that we can find that billions of money. You understand? It has a huge coverage all over the world. So the only way to do that is to cooperate. I cover West Africa, we cover Pan-African Television covers West Africa. We exchange with teleSUR, which is covering South America and so on. So we don't have to be in South America. We depend on the resources of teleSUR to be able to cover South America. And that happens with other media organizations and so on. Again, sometimes we are frightened by their apparent sophistication. They use very expensive equipment and so on. We don't have to use that expensive equipment. We can do it using mobile phones against their very sophisticated cameras and so on. So we need to find ways, of overcoming the threat that they pose, with their sophisticated systems and cameras and so on, which really mean nothing. It's the message which is important. It is not the tools which are used which are important and how to get this message across. And it is within this context also that social media has become very, very important in the dissemination of information. What do you need to be on TikTok? What do you need to be on the other social media and so on? And perhaps the time has come for our leaders to also begin thinking about developing alternative social media platforms. For too long, we have depended on a Western-propelled, Western-developed social media platform, which is not in our interest. So we need to be thinking, we need to bring our engineers together, we need to bring our information technologists together and so on, to begin to think about developing these alternatives, to enable us push our message, to enable us intensify our resistance against exploitation, against domination, and against the attempt to replace our culture with decadent culture.
And definitely that is one of the main points in debate in this colloquium, that is also, and maybe specifically targeting how we can make the most of these new possibilities that the digital platforms and the need to build our own digital platforms, how could that open those possibilities that you were just mentioning? We definitely hope that this colloquium here is paving the way for that to happen in the years to come. I thank you so much, Mr. Pratt, for joining us in teleSUR English. So, Luis, that was Mr. Pratt from Pan-African TV from Ghana. And as we were saying, those are the key topics that are being discussed here in the Colloquium Patria in the University of Havana, bringing together experiences from all over the world to really think about the challenges of digital communication nowadays, but also the possibilities of weaving those networks, making those connections, and thinking about, in the years to come, what it takes for us to build these new digital platforms and think about the new possibilities in terms of this digital struggle that is being done all over the world. So I go back to you, and we'll continue to bring you all the information around the world.